Just gotta make sure this is going live. All right, here we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Everybody's coming in. Give everybody a couple of minutes. Sorry, we were having a little bit of technical difficulties there this morning. So I'm going to bring everybody in, let everybody kind of come in and get into their spaces, get all comfortable. Yep, everybody's coming in. Nice little group. So far we have, yeah, look at this. It's great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Move some screens around here so I can make sure I've got everything in front of me. I can see. All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mass MEP webinar event. This is presented to you today by Mass MEP and AIM HR Solutions. This is the Navigating the General Grant Application webinar. So I'm Haley Steele, I'm the Marketing Director with Mass MEP. I am the moderator for the event, but that's as far as my duties go in this job. We actually have two amazing panelists with you this morning. And so we would just like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. So today we have with us Lisa Derby Oden. She is our Project Development Manager with Mass MEP. And from AIM HR Solutions, we have Ms. Kathleen Worthington. She is the Senior Director, Education and Workforce Training. So we had to actually shorten her title a little bit so we could take some time to get that out there for you. But thank you, ladies, both for joining us. And for those of you that are out there today, this is going to be a very educational 45 minutes for you. So you might want to get a little notebook and paper, or if you're a typer, get your typing going. You can also, I think, might even be able to set your Siri up and she can type this for you. So you would definitely want to take some notes. As you can see, you're all here. Your mics are muted. There will be plenty of ways for you to engage with Kathleen and Lisa this morning. Please use the Q&A. It is available to you if you have been almost a year now living under a rock and don't know how to use Zoom yet. On the bottom ribbon, there is an option that says Q&A. It's two bubbles, two little text bubbles that are on top of each other. Please feel free to type in there any questions you have. We strongly encourage you to use that. And the reason being is that more than likely, if you have a question, pretty sure somebody else in the audience has a very similar question. So please use that today, as Kathleen and Lisa will be monitoring that as we move along. We also have the chat option. We usually recommend for people to use that if they have something specific that maybe they want to send to Lisa or to Kathleen. Maybe it's more of a private issue that, you know, kind of want to take offline. So please feel free to use that as well. Like we said, we have 45 minutes scheduled for the webinar this morning. We feel it's plenty of time. And just so everybody knows, we are live on Facebook. So hello, good morning to everybody out there in Facebook land. But so you know, the content of this webinar will be made available. And also, if you know of anybody else within the organization, your organization or another company that you feel could benefit from this and maybe wasn't able to attend this morning, this recording will live on our Facebook page. So it's the Mass MEP Facebook page and it will be live. So that will be available. If you want to send them our way, they can watch the video. And then from there, you'll be able to get the contact information for Lisa and Kathleen. So that is my housekeeping for this morning. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Kathleen. So Kathleen, you are on.
Thank you so much, Haley and Lisa. It's always wonderful to partner with you. So Haley, if you could put up our first slide, that would be great. And we'll get rolling. And if not, I'm just going to roll on my own. Here we go. So anyway, that's just the agenda. Haley already told you we have 45 minutes. And so what we're going to do is just do a little back and forth between Lisa and I. And I believe if oh, there we go. Fantastic. We'll let her get to where we are. The agenda page. Yes, we're thrilled you're here. There we go. Perfect. So the agenda for us is really, the purpose is just to inform you, to give you a high level understanding of the workforce development training grants and we're going to focus in and do a dive on the general grant specifically today, because the general grant is the one that takes a little more time, a little more preparation, and some people can be pretty intimidated by it, but it's really not all that bad, and we'll walk you through that. We want you to leave with a better understanding of options, and most importantly, to reach out to Lisa and or to me and let us help you through the process. We can coach you, we can share best practices and make the process really simple. So this is our agenda. We're going to go through all of these training points lightly. And as Haley said before, ask us questions, chat to us, and we want to make this as meaningful and as helpful as possible for you. So off we go. We would do, if we were a smaller group, I would do introductions with everybody. You know, if you want to put it in the chat, your name, your company, and your position, that's always helpful because it's always another nice opportunity to network and to get to know who else is thinking about a grant. And if you're a smaller company, you might even be able to do a consortium, which is when smaller companies come together. So if you want to do your name in the chat function, your company, and your position, that would be terrific. I'll give you a minute to do that. And we won't go through all of it, but just plug it in there and then we'll know who you are and we'll be able to refer to it. I'm going to tag over to Lisa in just a second. I just want to tell you that grants is part of my role at AIM HR Solutions. I coach companies through the process and we don't charge a fee for it at all. It's just, you know, a good spirit and hoping that at some point, wink, wink, you'll think of us as your training provider. And we focus in on leadership, supervisory skills, more of the interpersonal side of doing business. I'm also involved in executive coaching and I design and deliver our training programs. So I have a wonderful job and really enjoy my time with my company. But I love partnering with Lisa, who will have a moment now to introduce herself. We work really well together and it's been a nice relationship for the past many years. So Lisa.
Hi everybody, it's Lisa Derby Oden here and I'm Project Development Coordinator at Mass MEP. And in my role at Mass MEP, I work with companies to help them develop their training grants and help them submit those. We have worked with companies doing this for over 20 years now. So we've got a lot of experience in doing this. And I've worked a lot with doing some of the consortium grants, which is smaller companies banding together to submit a grant so that, you know, you can put onesies, twosies into seats instead of taking a multitude of people off your floors at the same time. It's work that I enjoy doing. I really enjoy partnering with Kathleen, but also working with the manufacturers. We've got a great manufacturing community out there, and we're really proud to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Lisa. So next slide, please, Haley. So here we are. This is a place that you're going to want to bookmark. This is where Commonwealth Corporation, who is our grant administrator, they oversee the funds, they oversee all the applications for the Workforce Training Fund Program Board. And this is where you would go to fill out your grant application. It would be all things grant in this link. And it'll also talk about different grants that we're not going to get into detail with, but an express grant, for example. So you do want to have this, be familiar with this. This is a great site. Next slide, please. And general program funding priorities. Really important that you start with a strong business case. You need to be able to tell your story on why you're going to need these funds and what purpose it's going to serve. So our advisory board is really looking for a way for us to retain and grow business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So your story needs to tell a story of how you're going to retain jobs, how they're going to grow. Perhaps there's going to be increased wages. You know, it's part of a strategy that you have to strengthen and secure your business and keep it in the Commonwealth. You want to mention the training is going to make a difference in productivity, your competitiveness, your ability to do business, and the commitment that your company is going to make beyond this grant to not only pitch in and, meet them halfway with funding, but also to sustain the learning after the grant is done. You want to make sure that there is a leadership commitment from top down, that this is not just the end, but it's just the beginning of your training journey in investing in your people and developing them. So it's really important in your cover letter, and you will have a cover letter that is attached to your application. You're going to tell a story of how that's going to happen for you. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm going to take over here and I'm going to talk a little bit about the general grants are not the only kind of grant that the Workforce Training Fund gives out. There are 3 different kinds, as this slide shows you. There's the general grant that we're going to be talking about in more detail today, but there's also an express grant, which it used to only be for companies 100 or less, but in September last year, they opened it up to companies of any size, as well as a small business direct access program. Each of these programs is different. And the general grant, the investment that the company makes into the general grant is in their employees' time participating in the training. So it's sort of free money, if you will. You can get up to $250,000 to fund training over a 2-year time frame. But how much ever training that you apply for, you need to match with your employee wages as they sit in that training. So if you apply for a $50,000 grant, you need to match that with $50,000 of employee wages. With the Express grant, this is a little bit different. These are, it's a smaller pool of money. You can apply for up to $30,000 per year. The delivery time frame is 2 years, as it is in the general grant as well. But in this case, this is not an employee match situation. This is, you pay for the training upfront. Once it's been conducted, you submit your invoicing to Commonwealth Corporation, and they reimburse you up to 50% of that training cost. So sometimes if you're looking for, quick turnaround and you just need something to get done, or you want to experiment with some of this training kinds of things, this is a great way to get into it. Try it this way and then roll into a general grant. The Small Business Direct Access Program is still for companies that are 100 or less. And these trainings, there is no cost for the participants to apply, but they do have to register on the Commonwealth Court website and go through that whole process of that whole process. That's good.
Lisa, can I add a little bit on that one? Thanks for going through that. I want you to know that the Small Business Direct Access, that's one that training providers apply for the grant. So we get the pool of money, and then you get to come and apply for, we have seats, so to speak, and you get to register for those seats, and when the seats fill up, then they fill up. But we go for that grant. And with the Express grant, what I'm seeing right now, I had 4 calls yesterday on how do I get an Express grant for some classes that are online. The difference is the training providers are listed in a directory within the Express grant. So they've already been vetted, they've been approved, and you need to select from that list of training providers. And the class is listed there too. So you get to go in there and you can quickly grab a class, and it's, as Lisa explained, it's really very simple. As long as you have a good, what we're going to talk to you about is a certificate of good standing. And so they've been very popular because typically they're not available for larger companies. So because of last year and the pandemic, a lot of grant funds were left in the kitty, so to speak. So they were trying to really encourage companies to please use the funds, develop your people, and get some good training. So, but we want to focus on the general grant today because we feel like that's really where there's an amazing opportunity. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Sorry.
Yep, no, you're welcome. Thank you, Kathleen. Next slide, please. So here is where we're going to go ahead and start to get into the nuts and bolts of the general grant. As I stated, you can get up to $250,000 in training. And it doesn't mean that you should apply for that amount. Again, you have to remember that this grant is for a 2-year time frame. So you want to apply for the amount of training that you can comfortably absorb as a company over that 2-year time frame. There is a minimum grant value of not less than $10,000, however, to get into this. As we've said, the grant period is a 2-year time frame. And how long it takes for approval. Once you start working on the grant, it can take 4 to 6 weeks actually to even develop that grant. And then once the grant is submitted, it can take up to 6 weeks for it to be approved. And then once it's approved, it takes another couple of weeks for you to go through the contracting process. So you don't want to just jump in. Once you've heard that you've been approved, you don't want to just automatically jump in and start doing your training. You really need to wait until you've gone through that contracting process. Anything you do before the contract is signed and returned will not be paid for. So you need to keep that in mind. We did have a company once that got a little bit gung-ho and started doing their training, and you know what? They were out of luck on that early training that they did. And so normally what happens with these general grants is once you've completed your grant, there's usually a 1-year waiting period before you can apply for another general grant up to $250,000. But again, due to these unusual times that we've been having with COVID-19, Commonwealth Corporation has made an exception, and they've waived that 1-year waiting period in between. So right now, if you have a general grant and you close it, you can automatically reapply. And for all of those reasons that Kathleen stated previously, to encourage companies to keep training and upskilling their employees. Next slide. So, you know, if you wonder what kinds of things can go into your general grant, you know, we usually think of those skill set areas in these 3 areas: basic skills, then technical skills, and organizational skills. And again, the basic skills might help the individuals in their specific roles, and are things like ESOL and, you know, basic math and basic reading and things like that, that, you know, can certainly, we all need good skills in those kinds of areas in order to succeed in our jobs. And then you get into the technical skills that are really much more job specific. You know, how can I be a good machinist? How can I be a good quality manager? How can I be a good frontline supervisor? Those kinds of things. And then we get into the organizational skills that help the company overall to become a high performance organization. And it's actually the organizational skills is where AIM really comes in with a lot of their training as well. Next slide, please. There are things that are not covered by a workforce training fund grant. Okay. And this is, you know, where Kathleen and I can help a lot too, because we're familiar with these requirements. We work with them on a regular basis. We can quickly identify some of these little glitch areas, if you will, when we work with you. But things that are not covered are things like mandated training, things that are required by state or federal agencies like OSHA and DOT, or things that are required by corporate headquarters. If you're already in the middle of delivering some training and you apply to have that training covered by a general grant, if that's not going to be covered either, and if it's something that you do on a regular ongoing basis in your company. And then also the kinds of trainings that might be typically considered to be part of the cost of doing business, onboarding, refresher training, and some of the basic OJT. Some of those things are not going to be covered by a workforce training fund grant. Next slide, please. There are some things that Commonwealth Corporation likes to try to encourage with these grants or sees as priorities. And so greater weight is given to these grant applications when they're reviewing them. And so they're things that are associated with job growth, as Kathleen has previously stated, and or the increase in skills and opportunities, particularly of low skill and low wage workers. Okay, there's whether it's a minority owned business or a woman owned business, those kinds of things are given extra priority. ESOL right now is a huge priority for Commonwealth Corporation, and they've kind of singled that one out particularly. And then consortium applications that include multiple businesses collaborating is also a priority for Commonwealth Corporation. So, you know, these are things that if this is part of your makeup, it's an extra plus for you. Next slide, please.
So I'd like to take you through a few best practices that we've discovered over the years when we are filling out applications with our company partners. Number one, right out of the gate, you write this in bold, actively engage your company stakeholders. Your senior leadership must be a champion. It has to come from the top down. And we know that through change management sponsorship. It's really important that you're not just doing this as a little side project because you know it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's a great way to start for you, but you must engage your senior leaders. They need to have a stake in this whole process. So senior leaderships also have to be willing to give up a little bit of time because there'll be some questions throughout in the application that may require some information that you may not have access to. And so they're going to need to be around the table and helping you. Employees need to get on board. So that's again where change management and communication comes into play. We want to make sure that they know there's no surprises, that they actually have a voice in what possibly may be offered as training. Commonwealth Corporation looks for that. Did you ask your employees what they think they need? Have you involved your management in focus groups or conversations on what training is lacking right now? So making sure that it's a very inclusive approach is really important, including union reps if you have them on your site. Important also to focus on a few key training goals that support your overarching business needs for the next 2 to 3 years. This is not like boiling the ocean. It's not everything. It's not world hunger. It's like just 2 or 3, and you want to do it really well. So making sure that it's tied to your business strategy. And then we help you write SMART goals, very clear training objectives, and help you through a training plan that will make sense, like Lisa said, over 2 years. We're not going to just slam it all in year 1. We're going to spread it out strategically. Who needs to know what, when, and all of that is mapped out so that you have a good balance and are also able to adjust to the demand of your business. The worst thing you could do is have all this planned out. Something happens with the business, you save everything to the end. So we want to spread it out and be thoughtful and strategic about our planning. Another thing that I've learned, or we've learned, Lisa too, is that throughout your application, consistent messaging is very important. We need to make sure that we've connected all the dots, and Commonwealth Corp, when they do a review of your application, are really like auditors. They are amazingly detailed and are very, very thorough. So we want to make sure that we've done our due diligence too. And we have a consistent message all the way across, and it just makes sense. So those are some best practices that we have. We also have samples from other approved applications. So we can share, with permission from the company, we can share little tidbits here and there of general, wording for like a training grant or some thoughts around SMART objectives so that you don't have to start from scratch, because sometimes that's the hardest thing, is just to get started. Next slide, please. As far as general grant application timing, Lisa already mapped it out very well for you. The bottom line is you need to plan out. So it's going to be a period of months. Don't expect that in a month, you're going to just whip this grant off and off you go with your training. So be planful, be realistic, and we'll coach you along with that. But bottom line, get your sponsorship right from the beginning, map it out, and you're good to go. That will focus your timing.
Please enter the last 4 digits of the primary.
Oh, I hear someone. Someone needs to mute, please. Next slide. Okay.
Sorry. Please re-enter the
We still need someone to mute. I'm hearing some interesting little recording. Okay. Here's a sample development schedule when we talk about timing. First, you start with your training needs in your area of focus, your budget. I mean, are you able to afford this? Do we need to have any additional funding? Buy-in from your stakeholders? And then we just mapped out, we're going to come and partner with you regularly. We're going to give you time to do your work in between. We're available through Zoom. In the old days, a year ago, we'd drive around the state and sit. We'd lock ourselves up in a conference room for a few hours. We'd fire up the laptops and we were there right beside you. We may be able to do that, we would hope, again someday, but we may not need to. We have technology, we can share screens, and we can move it along. So this is just a sample. Next slide, please. Yes, so we have created a sample questionnaire, and what it does is it extracts some of the key questions that are going to be in your application, and we actually share it with you as your little pre-work to get, warm up your thinking and get you started on building that little business case and gathering metrics and starting to put your thoughts together before you get into the online application. We find that it really is a great time saver. And people really appreciate when we share this. So this is something that we will help you with, and we'll offer it up to you to share. Next slide. Lisa, I think this one is yours.
Yes, the certificate of good standing. I love this. This is one of the very first things that we ask companies to make sure that they have acquired. You need to submit a current certificate of good standing with your grant application, and that means it has to be within 6 months of age. So one of the things that happens with this, next slide, please, is that Massachusetts actually has 2 certificates of good standing. Go figure, right? One of them costs $12. That's not the one you need to get. The one that you need to get is actually through the Department of Revenue, and it is absolutely free. So that's the good news there. And this is, again, it's required by the Workforce Training Fund to submit for the grant, as well as being updated with all of your Department of Unemployment assistance information. That's how you qualify for the grant initially, is by being somebody who is current and up to date paying into the UI system in the state of Massachusetts. I want to kind of go back and just tag team off of something Kathleen was talking about with the grant application questionnaire itself. We also have developed a budget worksheet that helps to flesh out, what it is you're looking for training specifically, and whether you've got sufficient employee match to make the cost of the training and that kind of thing. And that's just another useful and helpful tool in putting everything together ahead of time that we help you out with.
Lisa, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Mass MEP has created this. It's phenomenal. It's just wonderful. I'm not a numbers gal. I'm a word lady. So between the two of us, they nail that. They get those numbers nailed, and I will help you with those words and the language and the editing. And I'd like to say we're a great marriage with that.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, I bow to you with your numbers.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the bulk of the training project is going to really be focused around these couple of questions. The training plan summary actually is a very simple piece to write. It really just encapsulates what it is that you're planning on doing for training. And it's the piece that is made publicly available when information about your grant is posted. So you don't want a lot of sensitive information or proprietary information in that piece. But again, we help you in crafting these. The part that gets to the meat of the matter for Commonwealth Corporation, that addresses all the issues and problems, what keeps you up at night and those kinds of things, is going to be detailed in the business objective. And, you know, again, this is part of what is on the application itself. We only ask you for the information that is needed in the application. We don't ask you for things that are not on the application. Next slide, please. So this is just a sample screenshot of what the application looks like online. You see the menu bar down on the left there. There's a lot of different categories that need a lot of detail and information filled in. But this is where you can see how that, you know, training plan summary and the objective that we just talked about are actually in the website. Next slide, please. And back to Kathleen.
Okay. So speaking of objectives and smart objectives, here are some of the categories. Open new markets, add or retain customers, look, inventory reduction, improving leadership skills. You don't have to start from scratch if you don't want to. We are here with lists, and then we can narrow it down. We've got to make sure that it makes sense for your story and your need. So we'll start there. Next slide, please. Also, the same thing when it comes to training impact metrics. Oftentimes we'll ask, and on the application will ask for your KPIs. Honestly, sometimes companies don't have KPIs, or they don't call them KPIs, and that's okay. Sometimes we're working with very small companies that wear many, many hats. They're just not that formal and structured. That's okay. We can still get to things like this. They're still measuring what matters. And so we just get the right words and help them figure that out. Others of you will have KPIs and will be able to have to narrow it down maybe to just 3 or 4. And you'll have a discussion around which are the right ones to tell your story. So next slide, please. I think
okay, I'm taking back over when it comes.
Yeah, and that's Lisa.
numbers. So again, this is an actual screenshot of the website and information that is asked for. And this is actually how how Commonwealth Corporation calculates the match that we're talking about, the employee match to match the training. They ask you to break your employees into these different categories that you see listed on the left there, the managers, and professional and technical, sales, production, service, and administrative. Sometimes it always makes me laugh. We present you with this list and ask for this information in this way. And sometimes companies go, well, we don't call them that. And so they change the categories all around. And then unfortunately, we have to go back and ask them to, again, go back and create them in this terminology, because this is what the application asks for. There are no definitions for these employee groups. You need to identify them as it fits for your company, like in your own head, and just then remain consistent throughout the grant application as you use these categories. And then you need to identify how many unduplicated trainees there will be in each category, as well as their average hourly wage. And you see it asks you for the cost of benefit. Typically, it's a 30% figure that we put in there, unless you're less or more than that, and we can change that number. And so then once you enter all that information, the website itself calculates the hourly wage, the total number of people, and then what the average training wage expense is. And they use that average wage across the entirety of the grant. That's how they calculate that match.
Thanks, Lisa.
Next slide.
Guess what? We're at question time, and we've had a few questions in our chat throughout, and I noticed that you answered a few. Stacy asked, how does a training provider get on the provider list? And Lisa, you said?
That you go to the Workforce Training Fund, and there is a button that you click on if you're a training provider, and it walks you through that entire application process.
Very good. So hopefully your head doesn't hurt at this point. Honestly, it's a lot to digest in the beginning, but we can break it down, make it manageable, make it so that you will still be able to do your day job and complete this application and really give your company a tremendous gift, your employees a tremendous gift of development, of training, and it will make a difference. So please feel free to reach out to us. Let's go through a couple of these and just see if, Lisa, is my company eligible to get grant funded training?
Okay, if you are applying for training for your employees in Massachusetts, okay, and you pay into the UI system and you can get a current certificate of good standing, then you are eligible to get grant funding.
And the UI system is?
The unemployment system.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Wink, wink. Okay. So we were awarded a grant a few years ago. May I apply for another grant?
Sure thing. Typically, when in non-COVID days, you would have to wait a year before you could reapply for a grant. Okay. During COVID days, they're saying there is no waiting period. If your grant has been completed, you can reapply right away. Now, here's the beauty of this. If you have a general grant, but you want to get an express grant at the same time or participate in the Small Business Direct Access Program, you can do all three of those things at the same time.
So it's not a twofer, it's a threefer. We can really go for it. Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's awesome. If my application's approved, when can I start training? We already learned this, right? Not instantly, but soon after.
Yep, when your contract has been signed and returned.
So, all right. So sometimes the dark side comes. What happens if my application is not approved?
So if that happens, it usually means that you may have not been complete enough in your answers or something like that. And so Commonwealth Corporation usually gives you some good guidance about what you need to do to make your grant application be successful. And they're interested in that happening for you. You know, you can reapply, you can redo that grant and reapply.
And you can just redo that little section if you need to. We've definitely seen that. That's not a big deal. So don't be discouraged. So we have a great question from Stacy. We'd be looking to train field sales employees who are not based in Massachusetts, even though our company is located in Massachusetts. Will this be a problem, Lisa?
Where are they paid out of?
Yeah, there's the question.
If they're paid through your Massachusetts payroll, okay, then they're eligible for the training. And it's sometimes people will also ask, you know, I hire a lot of people that come over the border from Rhode Island or Connecticut or New York or New Hampshire, you know, can they be trained? If they're paid on a Massachusetts payroll, they can be trained.
Thanks, Lisa. That's a good one. And the last one was, what is a consortium grant? You said a little bit about it before, but maybe just a snippet more.
Yeah, so in a general grant, you know, you're looking at all the training for your company by itself. And so that's a big time commitment, as we've talked about previously. You know, you're going to have to figure out how many people you can have be in a training at a time and still be productive, right? And so a lot of companies say, oh, you know, I can't afford to take, you know, the 6 or 8 people at a time, you know, out of production in order to do this training, but I still want to get my people trained. Well, then you're a perfect candidate for a consortium grant, because this is where 4 or more companies, usually 4 or more, partner together to meet your training goals. And that way, each company could say, send 2 people to the training. So you would still meet the minimum requirement people for the training, and you would be only taking what we say onesies, twosies, you know, off the shop floor at the same time. The reason that we talk about wanting to have 4 companies or more in a consortium is because if you are 30% or less of the consortium grant, you can actually still apply for a general grant at the same time that you're involved in a consortium grant, if you would like to. So we like to try to preserve that ability for you as your goals may change.
Okay. So final question, what's my next step? And I think it's also our next slide and maybe our last slide, Haley. See if we've got it. Yeah, contact us, reach out. We would love to collaborate with you. We'd like to help you through this process. We really believe in these programs. They make a huge difference in our companies across the Commonwealth. And we want to share our knowledge and our experience with you and really see you succeed. Lisa, do you have a final word?
I want to thank everybody for joining today, and I would be thrilled to work with you on preparing a general grant.
Mm-hmm. All right, we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks so much for attending. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
All right, one more second, ladies. And